Mark Peterson was a quiet man who lived alone in a small town near the edge of the woods. His house was simple, with a small porch and a garden that Daisy, his golden retriever, loved to run through every morning. Mark had once been in the military, and though he had come home safely, his mind still carried heavy memories that never really left him. He often had moments when his heart would race for no reason, or he would feel dizzy and lose focus. His doctor had told him it was a kind of anxiety that came from his time in service. That was why Daisy was more than just a pet. She was his partner, his friend, and his protector. Daisy had been trained as a service dog since she was a puppy. She could sense when Mark's breathing changed or when he was about to have an anxiety episode. She would nudge his hand or bark softly to bring him back to calm. Her golden fur shone under the morning sun, and her eyes were gentle but always alert. She never barked without reason, never jumped on strangers, and never acted out of line. Everyone in the neighborhood admired how well-behaved she was. Children loved to wave at her, and even people who were afraid of dogs felt safe around her because of her calm nature. Every morning, Mark and Daisy had a routine. They would wake up early, have breakfast together, Mark with his coffee, Daisy with her favorite kibble, and then take a long walk through the park. The park was peaceful, filled with tall trees and a walking path that led toward the busy part of town. It was here that a line of food trucks parked every morning, serving coffee, sandwiches, and hot breakfast plates to locals heading to work. Mark liked to stop there sometimes for a cup of coffee and a breakfast wrap. Daisy would sit beside him, tail wagging gently, always keeping her eyes on him. One morning the sky was clear, and a light breeze carried the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee. Mark walked his usual route with Daisy at his side. As they neared the park's food truck area, he could already hear the chatter of people ordering their breakfast. The most popular truck among them was called Sunnyside Eats. It was painted bright yellow with pictures of eggs, pancakes, and smiling faces on its sides. People said their breakfast burritos were the best in town. Mark had eaten there before a few times, and he always found the food decent. That morning, the owner of the food truck, a tall man with a gray cap, was taking orders quickly. He smiled at customers, but his eyes darted around nervously, as if something was bothering him. Mark didn't notice it at first. He stood a few feet away from the truck, waiting for his turn to order. Daisy sat quietly beside him, sniffing the air as she always did. But suddenly her posture changed. Her ears stood up, her nose wrinkled, and a low growl came from her throat. Mark looked down, surprised. "What is it, girl?" he whispered, patting her head gently. But Daisy didn't calm down. Instead, she pulled slightly on the leash, staring straight at the man inside the truck. Her growl grew louder, and within seconds she started barking, a deep, sharp bark that made everyone turn their heads. The people standing nearby looked startled. One woman stepped back, clutching her coffee cup. A few laughed nervously, thinking maybe the dog had seen a squirrel or smelled something strange. But Mark knew Daisy. She had been with him for years. She didn't bark at random things. Something about that truck had upset her, and it wasn't normal. The man in the gray cap frowned and yelled, "Hey, control your dog!" His voice was tense and his face looked pale. Daisy barked again, pulling toward the truck like she wanted to get closer. Mark held her back firmly but couldn't help noticing the man's nervousness. His hands were shaking slightly as he tried to continue serving food. Mark bent down and looked into Daisy's eyes. "What's wrong, girl? What's got you worked up?" he asked softly. Daisy's ears went back, but she refused to sit down. She stared at the man and barked once more, louder than before. People began whispering around them. "Maybe she smells something," one customer said. "Dogs have strong noses, right?" Another laughed and added, "Maybe she wants some bacon." But Mark's gut told him something was off. Daisy had never behaved like this, not even when surrounded by food. She had been trained not to react to smells of meat or cooking. Trying to calm the situation, Mark gently tugged Daisy's leash and stepped away from the line. "Sorry about that," he told the vendor, but the man didn't respond. He just muttered something under his breath and quickly turned to wipe the counter, avoiding eye contact. His sudden change in mood didn't escape Mark's notice. As Mark walked away, Daisy kept looking back, whining softly now instead of barking. Her tail was low and her body was tense. Mark stopped at a nearby bench, sat down, and gave her some water. "You're trying to tell me something, huh?" he murmured. Daisy rested her head on his knee, still uneasy. After a few minutes, Mark overheard two other vendors talking near their trucks. One of them, a woman selling coffee, whispered, "That guy from Sunnyside Eats has been acting strange lately. He keeps his windows closed most of the day. Doesn't even let people see the inside." The other vendor nodded. "Yeah, I've seen him dump buckets behind the park in the evenings. Smells bad too." Mark's concern grew stronger. He looked down at Daisy, who lifted her head and gave a small bark as if agreeing with him. He knew that service dogs could sometimes sense things humans couldn't, strong odors, chemicals, or even emotions. Whatever Daisy had smelled or sensed inside that food truck, it wasn't right. That evening, when Mark returned home, he couldn't shake off the thought. He told himself maybe it was nothing, but Daisy's reaction kept replaying in his mind. She was trained to alert him to danger or anything unusual. Her instincts had never been wrong before. After dinner, he sat at his small wooden table thinking about what to do. Should he report it? What if it was just a misunderstanding? Daisy came over and rested her head on his lap, letting out a quiet whine. Mark sighed. "All right, girl," he said softly. "I'll call it in, just in case." He picked up his phone and contacted Animal Control, explaining the situation. The officer on the line listened carefully and asked a few questions about what Daisy had done and which truck it was. Mark described the yellow Sunnyside Eats truck and told them exactly what happened. The officer didn't dismiss him. Instead, she said, "We appreciate you calling, Mr. Peterson. Service dogs are trained to sense things we often miss. We'll send someone to check it out tomorrow." After hanging up, Mark felt a mix of relief and worry. He didn't want anyone to get in trouble without reason, but his heart told him Daisy had done the right thing. That night, as he sat on the couch, Daisy curled up beside him, calm once again, her head resting near his hand. He petted her softly and whispered, "Good girl. You always know." Outside, the quiet town slept under the soft glow of streetlights. No one knew yet that Daisy's bark that morning would soon uncover something much bigger than anyone could imagine. It was the start of a story that would change the town's trust in the food trucks forever, and remind everyone that sometimes the smallest warnings come from the most loyal hearts. The next morning, Mark woke up early as usual. The sunlight was just beginning to touch the curtains, and the town was quiet except for the soft chirping of birds outside his window. Daisy stretched beside his bed, her tail wagging softly as soon as she saw him sit up. Mark smiled and gave her a pat on the head. "Morning, girl," he said in a calm voice. It was another peaceful start to the day, but deep down, he couldn't stop thinking about what had happened yesterday near the food truck. Daisy's strange behavior still puzzled him. She had barked and growled at that man like she sensed something dangerous. He tried to tell himself that maybe it was a misunderstanding, but Daisy's instincts had never failed before. Service dogs were trained to notice small details that people could easily miss: smells, body language, even hidden medical issues. Mark knew there must be a reason behind her reaction. After breakfast, Mark decided to take Daisy for their regular walk again. He wanted to see if she would react the same way near the food truck area. Maybe that would help him understand if it had just been a one-time thing or something real to worry about. As they reached the park, everything looked normal at first. Joggers ran past, children played on the swings, and the air smelled of morning dew mixed with the faint scent of coffee brewing from the nearby vendors. But when they turned toward the row of food trucks, Daisy's behavior changed again. Her pace slowed, her ears went up, and her nose twitched. She wasn't barking yet, but she was clearly alert. Mark could feel the tension in the leash. He followed her gaze and saw the same bright yellow truck, Sunnyside Eats, parked in its usual spot. The same man with the gray cap was there, serving breakfast to a small line of customers. "Easy, girl," Mark whispered, tightening his hold on the leash slightly. Daisy let out a soft, uneasy whine, but stayed quiet this time. Mark decided to watch from a distance. The man behind the counter moved quickly, avoiding too much conversation. When customers asked questions, he gave short answers and turned away fast. His nervous manner reminded Mark of yesterday. Something about him didn't feel right. A woman standing near Mark started chatting casually with another person in line. "You know," she said in a low voice, "my husband got food from this truck last week and ended up with a bad stomach. We thought it was just something he ate at home, but maybe it was this place." The other person nodded and said, "Yeah, I've heard a few people complain. I hope they keep things clean in there." Mark's stomach tightened. He glanced at Daisy, who was still focused on the truck, her body stiff. He trusted her completely. The more he thought about it, the more he believed she had sensed something wrong, something harmful. Then something unexpected happened. A young child walked close to the truck, dropping his toy near the vendor's feet. The man quickly stepped back and snapped, "Watch where you're going!" His tone was sharp, almost panicked. The boy's mother hurried over to grab her son, apologizing, but the vendor didn't say a kind word. Instead, he glanced nervously at the ground, picked up the toy and wiped his hands roughly on a towel that looked dirty. Daisy growled quietly, and Mark noticed the vendor looking around as if afraid someone might be watching too closely. Mark's instincts told him he couldn't ignore this anymore. He remembered the call he made to animal control yesterday. They had promised to look into it. Maybe it was time to follow up. He pulled out his phone and called the same number. The woman who had answered before recognized his voice. "Mr. Peterson, thank you for calling back. We've noted your report. A health inspection team is scheduled to visit that area soon," she said. Mark felt a bit relieved hearing that. "Good," he replied. "I just wanted to let you know the truck is still here, and my service dog is reacting the same way again." The woman thanked him for the update and promised to inform the inspectors to check the truck that very week. After the call, Mark decided to stay nearby for a while. He bought coffee from another vendor he trusted and sat on a bench not far from Sunnyside Eats. Daisy sat beside him, eyes never leaving the yellow truck. The park buzzed with activity, but Mark couldn't shake the strange feeling in his chest. Every time the wind shifted, a faint, unpleasant smell drifted through the air. It wasn't strong enough to notice right away, but once he caught it, he realized it was coming from that direction. A few minutes later, one of the other food truck owners, a friendly woman named Carla who sold coffee and muffins, walked over to him. "Morning, Mark," she greeted with a smile. Then, lowering her voice, she said, "Your dog was right to bark yesterday. Something's odd about that guy. I've seen him throw things into the trash behind the park at night. The smell is terrible, and he doesn't want anyone near his truck when he closes." Mark frowned. "You've seen that yourself?" he asked. Carla nodded seriously. "Yes, I reported it once before, but nothing happened. Maybe if someone else says something, they'll check it out." Mark thanked her and promised to mention that to the inspectors if they asked. It was becoming clearer that this wasn't just Daisy overreacting. People had noticed strange things too. Later in the day, Mark went home, but the image of that nervous vendor stayed in his mind. Daisy lay quietly at his feet while he sat at the table, thinking about everything. Her calmness at home was a reminder that she only became uneasy around that food truck. "You've got a good nose, girl," he said softly, rubbing her head. She wagged her tail but didn't seem relaxed until he spoke in his gentle tone. The next morning, Mark's phone rang. It was the same officer from Animal Control. "Mr. Peterson," she said, "thank you for your patience. We've coordinated with county health inspectors. They'll be visiting the food truck area tomorrow morning. You may see some officials there. It's part of a regular check, but we'll pay special attention to the vendor you mentioned." Mark thanked her sincerely. "I'll be around with Daisy just in case," he replied. That evening, word spread quietly among some of the local vendors that an inspection might happen soon. A few of them looked relieved, while others were nervous about what might be discovered. One of them told Mark that the man in the yellow truck had been acting even stranger lately, closing his windows early, covering things inside with large plastic sheets, and spraying something that smelled strong and chemical. When Mark heard that, a small chill ran through him. He remembered how Daisy had pulled toward the truck and how her nose wrinkled as if the smell had burned her senses. Maybe that was what she had noticed all along. That night, Mark couldn't sleep right away. He sat by the window with Daisy lying next to him. The quiet hum of crickets filled the air. He looked down at his loyal friend and said softly, "You might have saved a lot of people, you know that?" Daisy's tail thumped softly against the floor, her golden fur glowing under the faint light of the lamp. The next morning would bring answers. Mark didn't know exactly what the inspectors would find, but he had a feeling Daisy's sharp instincts had led them to something much bigger than anyone expected. And as the night faded into dawn, Daisy raised her head suddenly as if she already knew the truth was close. She gave one small bark, just one, and Mark smiled faintly. "Yeah," he whispered, "I believe you." The morning came with a light mist hanging over the park. The air was cool and the sun had not yet climbed high in the sky. Mark walked along the same path with Daisy by his side, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and concern. He knew that today was the day the health inspectors were supposed to come. Daisy walked quietly, tail moving slowly, her nose twitching as if she sensed something unusual was about to happen. When they reached the food truck area, several trucks were already open for business. The smell of coffee, toast, and fried eggs filled the air. Customers gathered around talking and laughing, unaware that something serious was about to take place. Mark noticed the yellow truck, Sunnyside Eats, parked in its usual spot. The man in the gray cap was there again, moving quickly, his face tense as he handed out breakfast sandwiches. Daisy stopped walking. She stood still, her body straight and her eyes fixed on the truck. Her tail stiffened and she gave a soft growl. Mark gently patted her head. "I know, girl," he whispered. "Let's just stay here and watch." A few minutes later, a white van pulled up near the park entrance. Two men and a woman stepped out, each wearing a jacket with the county health department logo on it. They carried clipboards and a small case with inspection tools. Another person in a uniform from animal control followed behind them. The team looked serious but calm as they approached the food truck area. People around began whispering. "Are they doing inspections today?" one woman asked. Another vendor replied, "Looks like it. I hope everyone's ready." The man in the yellow truck froze for a moment when he saw the inspectors walking his way. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for a towel to wipe the counter. The lead inspector, a woman with short brown hair, introduced herself politely. "Good morning. We're here for a routine inspection," she said. The vendor forced a smile. Of course," he replied quickly. "Everything's clean here. You can check if you want." His tone was light, but his eyes darted around nervously. Mark watched from a bench nearby, keeping Daisy close. The inspectors started their work carefully. They opened drawers, checked the temperature of the refrigerators, and examined the storage shelves. At first, everything seemed normal, but soon one of the inspectors wrinkled his nose and whispered something to the others. The female inspector nodded, motioning for him to open the back door of the truck. As soon as the door opened, a foul smell escaped into the air. It was strong enough that even people standing several feet away noticed it. Some customers covered their noses and stepped back. Daisy barked once and backed up slightly, her ears pinned. The inspectors exchanged uneasy glances. "What's that smell?" one of them asked, stepping closer to look inside. The vendor quickly tried to block the way. "It's nothing, just some old cleaning supplies," he said, his voice shaking. But the inspectors didn't stop. They asked him to step aside. Mark could see the scene clearly. The inspectors put on gloves and began checking the storage bins. Within moments, one of them pulled out a plastic bag filled with spoiled meat. The smell was so bad that he had to step outside to breathe. "This meat is rotten," he said firmly. "How long has this been here?" The vendor didn't answer. He just stood frozen, his eyes darting around as if looking for a way to leave. The inspectors continued to search. They opened another container and found several boxes of eggs that had cracked and dried, covered with flies. Another box held vegetables that were brown and mushy. One inspector muttered, "This isn't just unclean, it's dangerous." The animal control officer, who had been watching quietly, stepped forward. She pointed to a small area near the back corner of the truck where something moved. When she bent down to look closer, she found rat droppings scattered around and a half-eaten loaf of bread hidden under the counter. "You've got a pest problem too," she said firmly. The vendor's hands began to shake. "I was going to clean it today," he stammered, but no one believed him. The inspectors took pictures and wrote notes on their forms. They opened the freezer next, and that's when they found even more evidence of carelessness. Several pieces of meat were covered in frost, clearly refrozen after being spoiled. People around the park began to whisper louder now. "Is that what we've been eating?" one woman said, her face pale. A man near her added, "I had food from there last week. No wonder I didn't feel good." Others started backing away from the yellow truck. The lead inspector stepped outside and spoke clearly. "This truck is being shut down immediately. It is unsafe for public health." She posted a bright red closed notice on the window. The crowd murmured, shocked by how fast things had changed. The man in the gray cap tried to argue. "Please give me another chance." "I can clean it up," he pleaded. But the inspector shook her head. "It's not just about cleaning," she said. "You've been serving spoiled food. That's a serious violation." Mark stood quietly, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. He hadn't wanted anyone to lose their job, but he also knew this could have harmed many people. Daisy wagged her tail lightly, sensing his calmness. The animal control officer noticed them sitting on the bench and walked over. "Are you Mark Peterson?" she asked kindly. "Yes," Mark said, standing up. "I wanted to thank you," she continued. "Your call helped us catch this in time. The inspectors say it's one of the worst cases they've seen in months. You and your dog did the right thing." Mark looked down at Daisy and smiled. "It was her," he said softly. "She's the one who knew something was wrong." The officer chuckled and bent down to pat Daisy's head. "She's a smart one," she said. "Dogs like her can smell things we can't. Rotting food, chemicals, even sickness. She probably caught the scent before anyone else could." By now, the yellow truck was surrounded by inspectors documenting everything. They carried out trash bags filled with spoiled ingredients and sprayed disinfectant around the area. A few police officers arrived to assist, making sure everything was handled properly. They talked quietly to the vendor who looked down at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The other food truck owners watched in silence. Some looked worried, realizing how serious inspections could be. Others were grateful that the problem had been found before it hurt more people. One of them, Carla, walked over to Mark. "You were right," she said. "That dog of yours saved this whole place. If people had kept eating there, someone could have gotten really sick." Mark nodded. "Daisy always knows," he said with quiet pride. Daisy wagged her tail, her eyes soft and bright as she looked up at him. A few hours later, the inspectors finished their work and sealed the truck. They thanked the nearby vendors for their cooperation and reminded them to keep their own areas clean. As the crowd began to leave, Mark stayed a little longer, watching the once busy yellow truck now silent and closed. He thought about all the people who had eaten there, trusting the smiling face of the man who ran it. He thought about Daisy's first bark, the sound that had seemed like a small inconvenience then, but now felt like a warning that saved many. As they walked home, the morning sun broke through the mist and the park began to look peaceful again. Daisy trotted beside him, head high, her golden fur shining. Mark gave her a gentle pat and said, "You did good, girl. You really did." That day, Mark realized something important. Sometimes true protection doesn't come from strength or power. It comes from awareness, loyalty, and trust. Daisy had proved that even one small bark could make a big difference. And from that moment on, Mark knew he would always listen to her no matter what. After the food truck was shut down, the whole town started talking about what had happened at the park. The story spread fast. People couldn't believe that a place many of them visited for breakfast every morning was hiding such terrible conditions. The health inspectors had taken photos, written reports, and posted an official notice saying unsafe for public consumption. The yellow truck that once smelled like pancakes and eggs now sat empty, locked with a red sticker across its window. Mark and Daisy had quietly returned home after everything ended, but their day was far from peaceful. Mark kept thinking about what the inspectors had found: the spoiled meat, the insects, and the chemicals the man used to hide the smell. He remembered all the families who had eaten there, the children who ran around with ice cream cones, and the office workers who picked up breakfast burritos every morning. The thought made him uneasy. Daisy, sensing his mood, stayed close to his feet, resting her head on his lap as he sat by the window that evening. Later that night, Mark turned on the local news channel. To his surprise, the first story they covered was about the incident. The reporter stood near the park, speaking into the microphone while the camera showed the sealed yellow food truck in the background. "The popular food truck Sunnyside Eats has been shut down following a surprise inspection," the reporter said. "Health officials discovered spoiled food, rodent droppings, and forged safety permits. The owner has been taken into custody for questioning. Sources say the investigation began after a service dog's unusual reaction alerted its owner, who reported the situation to authorities." Mark blinked in disbelief as the screen showed a photo of him and Daisy walking in the park. "Someone must have taken it earlier that week. Looks like we made the news, girl," he said softly, patting Daisy's golden head. She wagged her tail gently, unaware of the attention she had brought. The next day, things in the town felt different. At the park, people gathered around the food truck area, pointing at the sealed yellow truck. Conversations buzzed in every direction. Some were shocked. Others were angry. "I can't believe I bought food from there last week," one man said. No wonder I wasn't feeling right, another woman added. Parents pulled their kids closer, shaking their heads in disbelief. Nearby vendors tried to reassure their customers that their food was clean and safe. Carla, the coffee vendor who had spoken to Mark before, told everyone that the inspectors were doing more checks that week to make sure all other trucks were following proper rules. We're all going through inspections now, she told a group of customers. It's for everyone's safety. Meanwhile, investigators kept digging into the vendor's background. They discovered that his real name wasn't even the one written on his food permit. He had used a false name to start his business. A few years earlier, he had been fined in another town for serving expired food from a market stall. When his license was taken away, he forged a new identity and bought the yellow truck under fake papers. The investigators also learned that he had been buying discarded meat and eggs from a supplier who sold expired goods at low prices. He would then clean them with chemical sprays to remove the smell and use them in his dishes. It explained why Daisy reacted so strongly. Her sharp nose had caught the scent of spoiled food and chemicals long before any person could notice. When the truth came out, people in the community were both shocked and grateful. The local newspaper ran an article with the headline, "Service Dog's Instinct Saves Town from Food Scandal." The article mentioned Mark by name, calling him the quiet hero who listened to his dog. The story quickly spread across social media. Photos of Daisy wearing her blue service vest filled people's screens with messages like, "Good girl Daisy," and "She's a real-life hero." At first, Mark felt a little embarrassed by all the attention. He never liked being in the spotlight. He had only done what he thought was right. But as he walked through town, people began to recognize him. Strangers stopped to thank him. "You probably saved lives," one woman said, patting Daisy's head. "We all owe your dog a big thank you." Children asked to take pictures with Daisy, and Mark could see how happy it made them. Daisy loved people, and she wagged her tail each time someone knelt down to pet her. One afternoon, Mark received a call from the health department. The same inspector who led the investigation wanted to meet him. "We'd like to personally thank you and Daisy for helping us catch a serious violation," she said kindly. "If you hadn't reported what happened, things could have been much worse." The next day, Mark met the team at the park. They were conducting another inspection to make sure all the trucks were now following safety rules. The inspector shook his hand warmly. "Your dog's instincts were remarkable," she said with a smile. She probably detected both the spoiled food and the cleaning chemicals the vendor used to hide the smell. "It's rare, but dogs like her can save a whole community." Mark felt proud, though he stayed humble. "I just trusted her," he said softly. "She's never wrong." As the investigation continued, more details came out. The man behind Sunnyside Eats was charged with multiple health code violations and fraud for using fake permits. He admitted during questioning that he had been losing money and couldn't afford proper ingredients. So he cut corners to stay open. He said he didn't mean to harm anyone, but his careless actions could have made many people sick. When the news broke, it became the talk of the county. Health officials used the incident as a reminder for everyone to report anything unusual at food places, no matter how small it seemed. They even started a campaign with the slogan, "See something, say something, even a bark can save lives." For Mark, the attention brought unexpected changes. Local animal shelters invited him and Daisy to visit so children could learn about the importance of service dogs. Schools asked him to speak about how dogs help people with medical needs. Though Mark wasn't a public speaker, he agreed because he wanted people to understand how amazing service dogs really were. Daisy sat beside him at each visit, calm and proud as he told their story. During one of those talks, a little girl raised her hand and asked, "Did Daisy really know something bad was happening?" Mark smiled and nodded. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes dogs can sense things we can't see or smell. When they try to tell us something, we should listen." The children clapped and Daisy wagged her tail, enjoying the attention. In the following weeks, life slowly returned to normal in the town. The park reopened its food area, cleaner and safer than before. New vendors arrived, carefully inspected and certified. People felt more comfortable eating there again, knowing stricter rules were now in place. One sunny morning, as Mark and Daisy walked past the same spot where Sunnyside Eats once stood, they saw a new food truck parked there. It was painted blue and had a small sign that read, "Fresh Start Kitchen." The owner, a kind woman, came out to greet them. "You must be Daisy's owner," she said with a smile. I heard about her. She's a local hero. Your first meal's on the house, Mark chuckled. Thank you, he said. He ordered a sandwich and coffee, and as he sat on the nearby bench, Daisy lay beside him, relaxed. The air smelled fresh and clean again. There was no tension, no uneasiness, just the warmth of a calm morning. He looked at Daisy, who rested her head on her paws, eyes half closed in the sunlight. You changed this place for the better, girl, he said softly. Because of you, people are safer. Daisy lifted her head slightly as if she understood and gave a gentle wag of her tail. That day, Mark realized something deeper. Sometimes true heroes don't wear uniforms or capes. They walk quietly beside us on four legs, noticing what we don't, protecting us in ways we may never fully understand. Daisy wasn't just his service dog. She had become a guardian for the whole community. And as they walked home through the park, with leaves rustling under their feet and the sound of laughter in the distance, Mark felt grateful. He knew he would always trust that small bark, that loyal heart and the silent courage of the dog who had saved a town without ever saying a word. The sun was shining bright over the park a week after the incident, and the air felt fresher than it had in a long time. The food truck area was busy again, full of laughter, music, and the smell of good food. But one spot still stood out. The empty place where the yellow truck, Sunnyside Eats, used to be. It was gone now, towed away after the investigation ended, leaving behind a clean patch of ground and a memory the town would never forget. Mark and Daisy walked along the same path they took every morning. People smiled when they saw them. Some waved, others stopped to say thank you. Daisy had become something special to the town, a symbol of awareness and trust. Her story had reached newspapers, social media, and even the local radio station. People admired her calm eyes and gentle heart, the dog who had sensed danger before anyone else did. As they passed through the park, Carla, the coffee vendor, called out cheerfully, "Hey, heroes! Coffee's on me today." Mark smiled and waved. "Thanks, but we're just doing our usual walk," he said kindly. Carla grinned. "Well, Daisy deserves something too," she said, pulling out a small dog biscuit from a jar she now kept just for her. Daisy wagged her tail as Carla handed it to her. Everyone nearby chuckled as Daisy carefully took it from her hand and sat politely, chewing happily. After finishing his coffee, Mark sat on a bench under a tree. He watched children run around, parents chatting and vendors serving food safely and proudly. It felt good to see things back to normal. He thought about everything that had happened over the past few weeks. The barking, the inspection, the news coverage, and the way the whole community came together afterward. It had been a strange experience, but it had also brought out something beautiful. A reminder that one small action, even from a dog, could make a big difference. That afternoon, a woman approached him wearing a dark blue jacket with a silver badge on the pocket. "Mr. Peterson?" she asked politely. Mark stood and nodded. "Yes, that's me," she smiled. "I'm from the mayor's office. We'd like to invite you and Daisy to a small community event this weekend. The mayor wants to recognize your service dog's actions officially. It's not a big ceremony, just a gathering to thank you both." Mark was surprised but touched. "That's very kind," he said. "We'll be there." Daisy wagged her tail as if she already approved. 2 days later, the event took place at the town park, near the same area where everything had started. A small stage had been set up with chairs and a few colorful banners that read, "Community Appreciation Day." People from all over town came to watch. There were children holding small flags, seniors sitting in folding chairs, and even some of the food truck vendors lined up to show their support. When Mark arrived with Daisy, the crowd clapped warmly. Daisy looked around, a bit shy at first, but her tail wagged happily as people smiled at her. The mayor stepped up to the microphone. He was a tall man with a kind face and a deep voice. "We're here today," he began, "to thank one of our town's most loyal and unexpected heroes." He looked toward Daisy. "Sometimes courage doesn't come with medals or uniforms. Sometimes it comes with fur, a wagging tail and a bark that saves lives." Everyone laughed softly, and Mark felt his eyes sting with emotion. The mayor continued, "When Mr. Peterson's service dog Daisy sensed something wrong at the food truck area, she didn't stay quiet. Her alert led to a report, and that report led our health inspectors to uncover a serious health hazard. Because of Daisy's instincts and Mr. Peterson's quick thinking, our community avoided a possible tragedy. Today we honor both of them for their care, awareness, and bravery. Then he reached for a small box held by an assistant. Inside was a shiny bronze medal shaped like a paw print. On the ribbon were the words "for loyalty and service." The mayor bent down and placed it gently around Daisy's neck. The crowd clapped louder, and a few people even whistled in support. Daisy looked up at Mark, her golden eyes calm and trusting, as if to ask, "Did I do something good?" Mark knelt beside her, rubbing her neck gently. "You did more than good, girl," he whispered. "You kept everyone safe." After the ceremony, many people came to take photos. Children hugged Daisy, vendors offered her treats, and even the mayor bent down to pet her. Reporters asked Mark how he felt. He smiled humbly and said, "I just did what anyone would have done. Daisy's the real hero here. I just listened to her." That evening, when the park grew quiet again, Mark and Daisy sat together watching the sunset. The medal around her neck shimmered in the fading light. "You know," Mark said softly, "you've changed more than just one day, Daisy. You made people believe in their instincts again. You reminded everyone to pay attention, to smells, to feelings, to warnings." Daisy leaned her head against his arm, and for a moment it felt like she understood every word. As days passed, Daisy's story continued to inspire others. Local schools used her story as a lesson about trust and responsibility. Health inspectors shared it during safety training, calling it the Daisy case. Pet lovers from nearby towns sent Mark letters saying how proud they were of Daisy. One letter from a family said, "We used to ignore our dogs barking, but after hearing about Daisy, we learned to pay attention. You never know what they might be warning us about." Mark began volunteering occasionally with a local animal rescue center. He and Daisy visited schools, hospitals, and senior homes. Daisy had a calm and loving nature that brought comfort wherever she went. Children loved to pet her, and older people smiled when she rested her head on their laps. She had gone from being a quiet service dog to a town symbol of kindness and awareness. One day, while sitting outside the same coffee truck where everything began, Mark noticed a new food truck setting up in the empty space. The owner came over to say hello. "You must be Mark," he said warmly. "People around here told me about you and Daisy. You two made this place safer for all of us." Mark smiled modestly. "We just got lucky," he replied. "Daisy noticed something I couldn't." The man nodded. "Well, that kind of awareness keeps communities strong," he said. "We should all pay attention like she did." As weeks turned into months, life returned to its calm rhythm. But every now and then, when Daisy barked at something, a strange smell, a new sound, or a sudden movement, people around no longer dismissed it. They listened. Her bark had become a trusted warning, a reminder that sometimes safety starts with simple attention. One autumn morning, as golden leaves fell around the park, Mark sat quietly, thinking about how much his life had changed since that day. He wasn't just the man who walked his service dog anymore. He had become part of a story that brought his town together. Daisy, lying beside him with her medal still on her collar, had reminded everyone of what loyalty and courage looked like. Mark looked at her and said softly, "You know, Daisy, heroes don't always have to do big things. Sometimes they just have to notice what others miss." Daisy lifted her head, looked at him with those warm eyes, and licked his hand gently. He laughed and rubbed her ears. "All right, hero. Let's go home." As they walked down the path lined with trees, the sunlight filtered through the branches, casting long, peaceful shadows. Daisy walked proudly beside him, her tail swaying gently. Every step they took felt lighter now, filled with quiet pride and peace. The town would never forget the day a service dog barked at a food truck. What seemed like a small moment of confusion had turned into an act of courage that protected an entire community. And for Mark, that single bark had changed everything. It had turned his loyal companion into a hero and reminded everyone that sometimes the greatest protectors come with 4 paws, a golden coat, and a heart that never stops caring.